You ever try to fit something new into a space that's already full? Come on, be honest. You ever stood in front of your closet, arms full of new clothes, and realized there's nowhere to hang them? So what do? You either make room or you just cram it in and hope nothing falls when the door opens again. And then pray no one sees the mess behind the pretty little door you closed. Now, I'm not here to talk to you about your closet. I'm here to ask, what if that's the picture of your spiritual life? What if the thing you've been asking God for, the breakthrough, the opportunity, the relationship, the healing, what if it's knocking, but you haven't made room? God doesn't move on your schedule. He moves where there's space. We often approach God like a delivery service, expecting him to arrive when it's most convenient for us. We pray on our timeline. We plan around our expectations. And when things don't happen the way we wanted or when we wanted, we assume he's not working. But God isn't bound by human calendars or comfort zones. He's not late. He's not early. He's always intentional. And he's looking for space, not speed. In 2 Kings 4, the Shunammite woman didn't know when Elisha would come. She didn't try to predict the moment. She just made the room. She cleared out space in her home and her life for the possibility that God might show up. That's what faith does. It clears space before there's a sign. Too often, we're asking God to move while clinging to things that leave no room for him. We want a fresh word, but our minds are cluttered with old thoughts. We want a new season, but we won't let go of the last one. We want breakthrough, but we're still holding tight to the very walls he wants to tear down. God moves in surrendered spaces. He moves in hearts that say, I don't need to understand the timing. I just need to be open. When you stop trying to fit God into your calendar and start creating space in your heart, that's when his presence begins to fill what's been empty. Not because you forced it, but because you finally made room. God doesn't need your agenda. He needs your availability. Preparation is a sign of expectation. You don't get ready for something you don't believe is coming. When someone's preparing a nursery, it's because they expect a baby. When someone sets the table, it's because they expect a guest. In the same way, when you start preparing your life, your mind, and your heart for what God is going to do, it's because you truly believe he's going to move. Faith doesn't just speak, it builds. It arranges. It prepares in advance. The Shunammite woman in 2 Kings 4 didn't wait for a sign, a prophecy, or a schedule. She simply said, let's build a room for the prophet. She didn't wait for the moment to be obvious. She created a space ahead of time because she expected God to show up in some form. That kind of preparation speaks louder than any words. It's one thing to say you believe. It's another thing to act like it. God responds to expectation because it reflects trust. It says, I'm getting ready even if I don't know when. I'm preparing even if I don't see how. When you prepare without proof, it stretches your faith. It pulls you out of passive belief and into active trust. You may not have the details, but you start making adjustments. You rearrange priorities. You clean out distractions. You discipline your thoughts, not because you've seen the miracle yet, but because you expect it. That kind of preparation isn't about control. It's about confidence. It's the internal declaration that says, God, whenever you come, however you come, I'm ready. Faith that prepares is faith that positions itself for presence. It doesn't sit and wait with folded arms. It moves. It builds. It opens the door. You can't receive the new if you're full of the old. God may be trying to pour something fresh into your life, but if you're still holding on to what used to be, there's no capacity to contain what could be. It's not that he's not speaking. It's that the volume of old pain, old patterns, old priorities is drowning out the sound of his new direction. We say we want change, but change always requires space. You can't step into a new season still dressed in the armor of your last battle. You can't embrace new relationships with old wounds still bleeding. There has to be a clearing out before there can be a pouring in. Jesus said in Matthew 9:17, you don't put new wine into old wineskins. Why? Because the old can't handle the pressure of the new. It breaks. And too many of us are trying to contain a new calling with an old mindset. We want God to bless us, but we won't release the things He's been asking us to lay down. The way you thought back then won't carry you forward. The tools that worked in the last season won't build the next one. God is not in the business of patching up your old identity. He's in the process of transforming you entirely. Letting doesn't mean dishonoring your past. It means making peace with it so you're not enslaved to it. It means trusting that God has something better ahead than anything you're clutching behind. You can't walk into a new room if your arms are full of baggage from the last one. There is a reason some things didn't come with you into this season. If your hands are full, how can you receive what God is handing you next? Faith makes room before the miracle arrives. It doesn't wait for the evidence before it acts. It steps out in obedience simply because God said so. Real faith doesn't ask for guarantees. It moves with expectation. It's the posture that says, I don't see it yet, but I believe it's on the way. That kind of faith builds the room before there's any sign someone's coming to stay. It sets the table before the guests arrive. It packs the bags before the door ever opens. Because faith isn't about reacting to what's visible. It's about responding to what's promised. In Hebrews 11, we see example after example of people who moved before they saw. Noah built the ark before a single drop of rain. Abraham left his home without knowing where he was going. They didn't wait for confirmation. They followed the voice. They made space in their lives, in their routines, for God to do something that had never been done before. That's not just belief. That's preparation birthed from faith. It's trusting that God's presence is worth the rearranging, the letting go, the stepping out. When you truly have faith, you won't stay stuck in comfort just because it's familiar. You'll start making changes. You'll begin cleaning out emotional clutter, shifting your schedule, sifting boundaries, or walking away from habits that no longer fit where you believe God is taking you. Faith always leaves footprints. It shows up in action, not just words. It looks like building space for what hasn't happened yet, as though it already has. That's the kind of faith God responds to. Not the kind that waits to see if it's safe, but the kind that moves forward, knowing who is leading. Faith doesn't demand signs. It creates space for them. God won't fill what you won't release. You can't ask Him to pour in peace while you're still holding onto anxiety like it's your safety net. You can't ask Him for clarity if you're still clinging to your own understanding. God isn't going to force His way into a heart that's already occupied by control, pride, or fear. He waits for surrender. He waits for open hands, not clenched fists. When we try to hold on to what we think we need, we often block the very thing God is trying to give us. You can't be full of self and expect to be filled with His Spirit. You can't carry unforgiveness and expect to walk freely in grace. Something has to go for something greater to come in. In the story of the rich young ruler in Mark 10, Jesus told him to sell everything and follow Him. The man wanted eternal life, but he couldn't release what he owned. He had the desire, but not the space. His heart was already filled with possessions, and because he wouldn't let go, he walked away empty. It wasn't that Jesus didn't offer, it's that He didn't make room. What you refuse to release is often the very thing preventing your next step. You may be asking for a new season, but still holding onto the mindset of the last one. You may want to walk in purpose, but you're still tied to the approval of people who don't even walk with God. There's a transfer that has to happen, an exchange. God doesn't fill what's already full. He fills the empty vessels. He blesses the surrendered hearts. If you want Him to pour out something new, you have to be willing to pour out what you've been holding on to for too long. Your capacity determines your encounter. What you experience from God isn't limited by His power. It's often limited by your preparation. God is limitless, but He will only pour to the level you're willing to receive. If you bring a small container of faith, He'll fill it. But if you bring an empty room, He'll fill that too. The question isn't whether God is able, it's whether you've made enough room for Him to move fully. Some people miss the depth of God's presence not because he's distant, but because they didn't build enough capacity to hold what he wanted to give. In 2 Kings 4, the prophet Elisha told the widow to gather jars, not just a few. The oil flowed as long as there was capacity to catch it. The moment the jars ran out, the oil stopped. God's supply didn't end, the space to receive it did. What if the level of breakthrough, provision, or revelation you're walking is directly tied to the size of your expectation and the space you've made for him to work? We want God to pour, but we don't always want to expand, and expansion is uncomfortable. It means stretching your thinking, enlarging your faith, increasing your discipline, and sometimes stepping into roles or environments you feel unqualified for. But God won't grow what you won't stretch. If you want more, you have to make more room, more trust, more time in his presence, more willingness to obey without understanding the outcome. God's presence will never be confined, but he will not overstep what you've prepared. He honors faith that builds capacity. If you believe for greater, prepare for greater. If you're praying for overflow, start setting out more jars, because the flow of God is endless, but the space you create determines how much you'll actually encounter.